We're going to talk about Alec, the American Legislative Exchange Council.
That's all I know, I just got the acronym.
Very important to know about. The one thing I learned about Alec was they were very instrumental in those stand your ground laws. They were very instrumental in getting those laws passed. So this is a very important segment of our program also. And this is Sarah Swanbeck from Common Cause. She's their legislative affairs person, and she works on issues of good government, ethics, money in politics, campaign finance reform, all the things we've all been interested in. All of them come together to make sure that we have a democracy in this country. And I'm not going to keep talking. I'm going to let Sarah talk.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, so I think we're going to keep on the theme of transparency a little bit here, but I'll talk more broadly about some of the issues that Common Cause works on in terms of keeping the relationship between our government officials and citizens transparent and open. So how many people are familiar with Common Cause? That's good. So actually we're one of the few groups, I think, who's kind of like a nonpartisan group working in good government reform. In particular, I work for the California Common Cause branch here, and so I'm based in Sacramento, and for that reason I sort of see everything through the lens of California state politics, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. Alec tends to be a little bit more at a national level, so I'll give you kind of the context there and then talk about how it may or may not be affecting us here in California. But just to talk a little bit, for those of you who aren't familiar with Common Cause, we like to think of ourselves as the citizens lobbying group. So I'm technically a registered lobbyist, although I think they put advocate in my title instead of lobbyist because it sounds a lot better. But technically, we like to think of ourselves as a citizens lobbying group just because corporations can go out and hire themselves nice fancy lobbyists who can spend their full-time job in Sacramento or in DC lobbying on behalf of that corporation. So the corporation has a very narrow set of interests, and they spend a lot of money representing that narrow set of interests. And if you're a lawmaker and you're hearing from a few different lobbyists who have those narrow interests in mind, you might get the sense that that represents the broader views of the constituents that you actually represent, and that's not actually the case. And so what Common Cause tries to do is actually represent the broader public at large in terms of what you think government should be and how you think our public officials should act. I think we're pretty active and well respected here in California and across the country, and we have 400,000 members nationwide. And if you're curious after this, you should go Google us and find our website and join. So some of the issues that we work on in general, I can speak to. We do voting rights and elections reform, and so I don't know if some of you have followed the Supreme Court case that happened last year that essentially dismantled part of the National Voting Rights Act. So that happened, and so we've been trying to find ways to fight back against that. We do a lot of election integrity work, so around elections, making sure that people have access to the polls, making sure that people aren't out there waiting in lines. We fight back a lot against voter ID laws that have been tried to be passed that are incredibly discriminatory. We also do a lot of ethics reform. So for those of you that follow California politics, I started this job like 4 months ago, and since I started, 30 state legislators have been indicted or charged. So I thought like it was me for a while. I guess this is not really normal. Anyway, so we do a lot of ethics work just because, beyond just, it being important for us to have morally respected officials representing us, holding them to a higher standard. We really do think that the way that you perceive your public officials is really important. It can be incredibly corrosive if people won't turn out to vote if they don't think that their vote matters, or if they think that they're being represented by officials that aren't actually good people or accountable. So we do lots of ethics reform as well. And then a big one for me that I kind of am passionate about is campaign finance reform. And so we've seen, for those of you who follow at the federal level and the Supreme Court, what they've been doing on this, they've essentially been, one decision after the next has been deregulating our campaign finance system. And we're kind of stuck here at the state level in California. There's not a whole lot that the state can do to fight back, except maybe try and get better disclosure. So the Supreme Court says, yes, as many people as they want can spend as much money as they want in our elections, and the most that we can do in California really is say, okay, well, at least we want to maybe know where the money is coming from. That's kind of the best that we have going on right now until we get a constitutional amendment to overturn those decisions. So we're really working a lot on campaign finance reform here in California. And then also, in particular this year, California Common Cause is working on initiative reform. So for those of you that are familiar with voting in California and have to go to the ballot every year, every election cycle, and see 10 or 12 initiatives that you have to vote on, and it's not really clear what a yes vote means and what a no vote means, or you have to Google a lot to figure out who's actually funding which side of the campaign. So California Common Cause has a bill going through the legislature right now, SB 1253, and I left a postcard over there, that is basically trying to make that whole process more transparent, trying to introduce things like the ability to withdraw an initiative so that we don't have as many initiatives on the ballot. If a proponent decides that they want to take it off, they can. Things like that just make a lot of common sense, so that's something that we're also working on right now. So are there any questions about, I can answer questions about what Common Cause does since we're right here, but I can also go on to talking a little bit about Alec and what they're up to. Yes.
How does Common Cause decide its priorities?
Yeah, so we have a national governing board, and then we're also represented in 35 different states, including California, and so the California Common Cause Board every year sort of elects what the priorities are going to be for the coming year. And some of that is negotiated with the national board, but a lot of it, California is fairly independent. So I don't know, for those of you who have been in the state a while, the whole redistricting process that happened in California, so the process by which we just finished redrawing all of the district boundaries for how we elect our officials. California Common Cause was instrumental in taking that process out of the hands of the politicians who have a vested interest in how those lines are drawn and putting it with an independent commission. And what we've seen since then is we've seen much more competitive districts, which is what we want, right? We want more competition when it comes to electing public officials. So I don't know if there are particular priorities that you would like to see Common Cause address, but yeah, that's sort of how we do it with our board. It's something that we're not quite as focused on here in California in terms of like my day in and day out work in Sacramento, just because, as I'll describe in a second, it hasn't been as active in California for a few reasons. So what is the American Legislative Exchange Council? It's sort of this like superhuman lobbying group in a sense, and also at the same time a front group, because one of the primary issues with the American Legislative Exchange Council, so it's a group that's made up, its membership is state legislators, so state level officials from California, for example, might be members of Alec, together with corporations. And so you have these two entities kind of mixing together, these state legislators and these corporations. And as I described right at the beginning, right, when you talk about a corporation and how they interact with our public officials, they're representing, right, that very narrow interest that is not representative of people as a whole. And so what we have with the American Legislative Exchange Council is a group that basically gets together to write model legislation every year. And it's these corporate interests that have a seat at the table with these legislators behind closed doors. They basically get together and help write legislation that would benefit these corporations. Alec primarily is funded, so it's funded through state legislators pay dues, right? But they pay about $50 a year to be a part of this group. The corporations that are part of this group, on a sliding scale, kind of can pay anywhere from $7,000 up to $25,000 to be a member of this group. And the sliding scale is dependent on which sort of task forces that they're involved in. So there are 9 different task forces within Alec, and depending on sort of the power of the task force that you're on, you pay more to be a part of this group. So that right there should be raising some red flags. And so, like I said, so a lot of the funding actually is coming from corporations. 98% of the funding is coming from corporations. And they get together behind closed doors to draft legislation that is of interest to these corporations. And Max, as you mentioned earlier, like a good example of this would be the stand your ground law that was enacted in Florida that led to the whole Trayvon Martin incident. That was an Alec model bill. And so what happens once these legislators, have drafted their model bills behind closed doors, state legislators go back to their states all over the country, and they every year, I think they propose about 1,000 different bills a year, and of those 1,000, about 1 in 5 is actually passed. So that's a huge amount of influence. As you can see, that this narrow group of society, these corporations, basically have bought access and actually get legislation passed. That's access that you or I do not have. I haven't even mentioned sort of one of the most egregious parts of this whole thing is that Alec is registered as a 501c3. history with the IRS. Oh good, most of you know tax code, that's great. So 501c3 is, I mean, a primary requirement for you being able to file as a 501c3 is that, I think it's stated that, basically, no substantial part of your activity can come from lobbying. And if you ask representatives from Alec, they still deny that this is actually lobbying, which is just insane. If you actually look at any of the documents that have made public, they have, whole legislation trackers. They have, state legislatures on record as quoting, that they take into account advice from Alec. Alec sends out kind of these action alerts ahead of bills going through different state legislatures. So it's really that their activity is linked to trying to get legislation passed, which is the definition of lobbying. So basically what we have here is a group of corporations that are tax exempt in some way. It's tax exempt lobbying. And so actually Common Cause back in 2010 filed a whistleblower complaint with the IRS basically saying, hey, Alec is registered as a 501c3 and here are all these documents that show this is actually a significant portion of what they're doing is lobbying and you should call them on it. And so that complaint is actually still sitting with the IRS right now, so that was several years ago.
I wonder why nothing's happened.
Yeah. And so this brings me back then to California and what's going on. So if you look at the membership of Alec, it is primarily a more right-leaning organization in terms of the state legislators who are participants. And so I think for that reason, because California does tend to elect more Democrats and have more Democrats in the state legislature, we haven't seen a lot of Alec activity. So the only bill that I know of that was actually enacted here was a bill in 2010 by State Senator Alex Padilla, and it was a telecom deregulation bill that actually did pass. And it's also difficult to track Alec legislation because, so there's an organization, I have to look it up, that actually keeps a database of all the known Alec legislation. And so the only really way to tell is you'd have to have someone very closely tracking all the legislation that gets passed in California and trying to match keywords to figure out kind of the source of that legislation. But to our knowledge and to the best knowledge of some of these groups that actually track ALEC legislation, so ALEC Exposed, I think is the website you can go to, and we have a whole database of ALEC bills. But it's sort of a little bit on an ad hoc basis like that. It's very difficult to know sometimes until after it's already passed. So that's, yes?
Question, have you found it kind of odd that the person who's running for Secretary of State is the one who supported this ALEC bill, and that the other person who ran for Secretary of State is probably going to be behind bars? I mean, and so we have just, I mean, can you get involved in, I mean, does Common Cause get involved in actual political races as well, since you're lobbying? Would you not really bound by 501c3 lobbying?
So we don't endorse candidates.
But you can endorse policies.
Endorse policies, yes, and we do. And so that's primarily what I do in Sacramento, is endorse different policies. Contributor to his 2006 and 2010 campaigns with AT&T, and AT&T is a member of ALEC. So that's how you get. So AT&T would go to ALEC and help write model legislation such as a telecom deregulation bill, and then get a state senator to carry that.
So actually, that's fine.
Just real quick, is there a list somewhere of all the ALEC members?
Of all the ALEC members? So if you go to alecexposed.org, they have like a database of all the known bills, and I think they also have they should have a list of all the corporations, I think, that are known members of ALEC. I'm not sure on the state legislator side if that's public.
Because it'd be kind of interesting to correlate, there's a wealth inequality documentary that was recently released about
Robert Reich?
what's that?
Robert Reich's documentary?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Basically about how we're moving towards a patriarchy society where there's like a smaller group of people that basically go behind closed doors and pass legislation that works towards them to make them more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Padilla bill, which I think deregulates telecoms, I think that's the gist of it.
That was just like,
And I learned about it from Derek Cressman, who's running for
yes,
Secretary of State.
I'm sure
you
you
know.
probably pay attention to that.
We'll campaign against it if he's ever elected. But my question is, on that issue, as a policy issue, has Common Cause come out and taken a stand on telecom deregulation or any of the issues around telecom stuff?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So we do a little bit on that and a little bit on tied to that, like with media reform. But in California, we haven't done as much. We've done more on telecom deregulation at the national level, I should say. It just hasn't been a priority here in California for one reason or another. Yeah.
I wondered if you could get, because a lot of people may not know, and it seems to be kind of scattershot. That was one of my questions. Is they get involved in so many different things. Is it? I'd
Yeah.
like it if you could speak to some of the national bills that they have passed or that they're trying to pass, because I know they're trying to prevent rooftop solar in a lot of places. And then the gun thing, it just seems scattershot. I don't know
They
where all
get
these
involved
things.
in so many different issues,
Yeah.
and they do tend to be more politically, I guess, on the Republican side of the spectrum in terms of how the issues line up. But they get involved in everything from, so they're involved a lot in a lot of voter ID bills that we've seen try to get passed, the gun bills that I mentioned, the stand your ground laws. They're huge in environmental deregulation. It is very scattershot, and I think it depends at any given time on the membership of Alec, the corporate membership. So when they have like a lot of communications group like AT&T as members, they're clearly representing their interests when they're paying like say upwards of a $25,000 membership fee, and they have a very big seat at the table.
So whoever has the most money gets to go past.
Yeah, so like tobacco is in the room. I'm trying to think. I'm sure big coal. So in California, one of the areas we're trying to focus on, because we haven't seen a lot of Alec bills being proposed in the legislature, so we're sort of tracking that as they happen, but we haven't seen that many. But an area that we're trying to focus on is actually corporate membership, because here in Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, forgetting one, a bunch of those groups, we're trying to call on them to leave Alec because they're all members right now. And so that's sort of one area where we're trying to be a little bit more active here, and hopefully we'll have some success. We're going to do a big action on May 14th. There's a Google shareholders meeting. There's going to be a big protest there for that. So, yeah.
Is it also true that within these meetings that they have where they write model legislation, that the legislators don't have veto power over any of the things that they propose?
So I'd have to review the exact structure, because I mentioned that they have these I think it's 9 task forces within Alec, and I don't know exactly how, not being a member myself, I don't know exactly how their priorities move. So according to Alec, any spokesperson you ask will say that the corporations themselves don't get sort of final say over what model bills come out, that like the final voting committee or the final task force where everything gets vetted through, that's all made up of legislators, they say. And so their claim is that because of that, it's not really lobbying, because it's the legislators that are coming up with legislation. But you have to go through the 9 different task forces to get there that are made up of corporations. So did that answer your question? Sort of. Yeah. Yeah.
Stand up here.
From one point of view, isn't it better to have Alec at least out there in the open? That people can at least storm against, rather than be hidden behind closed doors and
But it's not exactly out in the open, because all of the negotiations in terms of where the bills are coming from, that's all happening behind closed doors. And also, the only reason why we know what Alec bills are is because we have sort of some of these good government groups who are out there actively tracking.
Could you join Alec?
What's that?
Could Common Cause join Alec?
I don't know if we'd ever tried. I think if we could pay the dues, which I don't know if we could since we're a nonprofit, but yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how they select their membership, but I think, yeah, if you can pay into the group and be a member. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know that they necessarily be, I don't see them necessarily now as sort of being out in the open. I see them.
Well, there was an argument in the autism community, because the change in the insurance reform for the autism community was a big issue. And Alec it's a very hard sell with Alec. But many people in Alec are very in favor of it.
Interesting. So in that one instance, I guess you're saying that the policy in question wound up being out in the open just because.
It depends on your point of view. There's something called the Combating Autism Act, that's up for reauthorization. And a lot of problems with it. And because it just collects data on people with a very vague diagnosis, but it doesn't provide any way of services. And you've got a group called Autism Speaks that is a very controversial group that is pushing for insurance reform in every state, so that parents with autistic kids can get behavioral services paid with insurance. And that's been a big battle because no behavioral services are regulated by the FDA or anything like that. And now insurance companies don't have to pay for it. So that was one of these issues that's kind of been very difficult that's been out there.
And what was Alec's role in that, or?
Well, Alec being a big spokesperson for the insurance industry was apparently were attempting to skew the coverage in some kind of bizarre way that I didn't understand.
I didn't follow that particular issue with Alec, but I don't know if I can speak to it specifically.
Well, for everybody with neurological disorder, from Alzheimer's on to all the other diseases, it's been kind of an issue. Because when the corporations are making the decisions, it leaves people with communications disorders out.
That makes me, I see what you're saying.
That if you ask a legislator, I mean, to his or her face, are you a member of Alec? Do you get the truth?
I think it probably depends on who you ask. I guess I wouldn't know if I was getting the truth. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could ask. I would say in California, most legislators that I deal with are not members. So, and you wouldn't have to be a member, so Senator Padilla wouldn't necessarily have had to be a member of Alec to carry that bill, right?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What can we do to fight that
To fight back against Alec?
Yeah.
Like I said, here in California, it's a lot about calling on corporations to leave their membership. So, like I mentioned, the different groups in Silicon Valley are kind of the ones we're targeting right now: Google, Facebook, Yahoo. You know, just as an example, after the Stand Your Ground incident in Florida, a whole bunch of corporations, they got very bad press, and so a whole bunch of corporations left. They moved on. A lot of fast food industries, just like random groups who were part of it, didn't want to be associated with Alec. So I would say, yeah, becoming, you know, joining one of the protests that we're organizing. If you go to commoncause.org/CA, there's more information about some of the events that will be heading up around these corporations in Silicon Valley.
And is the primary goal to, I mean, dismantling these kind of organizations is one thing, but I mean, in some ways they can be good, but as long as they're transparent about what they're doing. So like the closed doors thing was kind of shady, right?
Yeah, the transparency thing is an issue.
Not knowing which bills they're trying to pass through.
Yep,
that kind of thing.
and the tax exempt status is a huge one. Why are
Yeah,
you, why are you
yeah,
claiming
so-
to not be lobbying if that's all you're doing? Like, that's really all that they're doing. And the fact that the IRS hasn't taken action on this in several years is really bizarre to me. Because the IRS has come out against some very small nonprofits and made these bizarre statements about them lobbying, but then they're kind of ignoring the elephant in the room on this
I mean, this is conjecture, but I would imagine inside of Alec that the people who are behaving something like quasi-legislative aides, like in the legislature, the people we elect don't do the grunt work. They have these younger, lawyer grads that are doing all the writing. They're typing up the Word documents and then, they talk it over with, the sponsor who's the legislator. I would imagine inside Alec that the people, the lawyers who are actually writing the Word documents, which are the proto, laws, are probably people who are on leave from the corporations who are members of Alec. And then they hand it to the legislators who are paying $50 to be members. And then they spread out to all the states that have Republican senates and assemblies, and they infest these things into the bill writing process in those states. And plus those corporations then probably start funneling campaign contributions to their viruses who are bringing these Word documents. If you pulled open the Word document in the legislature and looked at the property, you might probably still find Alec there in the properties. But maybe they're smart enough to strip that out now because in the past that's happened. That's probably what's going on. You're too polite to say it.
No,
you're not partisan, but
No, that's what's going on. And like I said, that there are these databases now of groups that are beginning to track these bills, and so the only way, say from actually going into their file and seeing Alec in the file name somewhere is actually matching language, and so that's what we're doing.
They're doing what professors can do now to find plagiarists. You can
Yes.
do word analysis, paragraph analysis, to find that there's an 85% similarity between the original proto document that Alec has produced versus what the legislative people in each of those state legislatures that are, again, run either in the lower house or the upper house by a Republican majority, so they can force these things through. So nothing happens in California for the last couple of years because California has had a majority, a supermajority until these three crooks got, arrested in both the upper and the lower house of the legislature. So there's nothing good about Alec.
And you
There's no
alluded to the other.
saving grace about it. It's just malevolent and evil.
You didn't go that far. But you alluded to the other side of it that I talked to a little bit when I was speaking about the Padilla bill, which is the other side of this is the campaign contributions, because I mean that gets into a whole nother monster. Like if you look at the corporations that are actually members of Alec, and then you go and look at what their campaign contributions were, they line up very well.
Oh, yeah,
Who's giving the most, right?
Two-pronged assault.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what's going on. So, and we actually did a report. Our national group. Common Cause did a report on Alec several years ago, so it's a little bit old, but in the report itself, if you go to our website, it's there, and it actually has numbers about campaign contributions for some of these top members, so hopefully that's helpful.
Look, what's my image doing there?
It was the story
TV
that
is
set a new
actually-
benchmark for
your TV
bad
spies on me.
landlords.
The defendants
You know that, right?
sold
Your TV is
Oh,
spying.
yeah, sure,
Look,
yeah.
what's my image doing
it
there?
was something that they were
What?
praying
What
for,
image? What are you talking about?
luckily my brother and I
What?
were in a position to.
My image was on my camera
to
from
the
your
girl.
TV. How did
The
the TV get
resiliency
my
that you
image?
see is
That's all I want to
amazing.
know.
You know, the
I don't
joy on
know.
their face.
I'll show you
just
what
to
I'm talking
meet
about.
Now
us,
it's not
let
working.
alone,
Hold on,
you
it
know,
was working, but now it's
you
not.
know,
Okay, just give me a
Look.
Flip the switch on it.
And that was it. Then it goes on to the other story. Goes on to this one.
And
Look.
who wants to have that insurance by the first of the year.
It does it
Yesterday, a
every
group of
time you go to
50
that
students
part of
went
the
door to
screen.
door
My
spreading the word about
image
tomorrow's
comes up
deadline.
right
They
because
call
it's
themselves
whatever the
Covered
TV
Berkeley
is looking
Brigade.
at.
Healthcare
In other
workers
words,
from
your
SEIU
room is
also
being
post-
filmed by your TV. Watch, look.
Why?
Parla.